Hello and welcome to another Comics Burst from the Full Force podcast, sponsored by Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, where we take an in-depth look at the newest G.I. Joe comics and related titles of the week, with me as your host, Chris Mother Chuckles McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80. And joining me for this episode is Brian Mother Hickey. On this instalment of your absolutely favourite kind of burst, we look at the latest issue of Paul Allor's G.I. Joe comic issue number 8. So without further ado, let's get stuck in, shall we? The Joes travel to Eastern Europe to sabotage a key component of Cobra's industrial war machine. To do so, moral lines will have to be crossed and complicated relationships will have to be destroyed. G.I. Joe's multi-pronged assault on Cobra is just beginning. And let's actually talk about the real synopsis of the comic. Cobra has taken command of the world. To fight back, G.I. Joe recruits civilians, training them as spies, assassins and saboteurs. Recently, G.I. Joe has focused its efforts on Cobra's battle android troopers, gathering intelligence and finding ways to fight back against the Cobra death machines. So we've got slight changes to the usual crew on this one. Obviously it's still writer Paul Allor. We have artist Emma Viacelli now on the interiors, colours Brittany Peer, letters Neil Uyutake and editor Bobby Curnow. So a new team, a new artist on this one, Brian. First off, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be back on the show talking about Paul Allor's G.I. Joe, and really looking forward to getting stuck into this issue. I know we were talking about it just before we kind of got on the air, but I reread the entire run in a single sitting. I just got to say, it's amazing.
Impressive
how it
work.
all weaves together. This is really... and I love where this is going. So can't wait to get stuck into this and talk about this comic.
Yeah, so we have, like I said, we will speak about the art kind of as we go through, I suppose, in this one. It's again, this has happened in the past. We've had Chris Evenhouse is usually the artist throughout the run, but then obviously they'll get new artists in. I think Nico Walter was one.
Yes.
There have been different artists come in and out. So it's nice to kind of get another kind of, what's the word? Like, I suppose, like artistic interpretation of these characters. Now, what is interesting about this issue is it focuses not on, the current crop that we've already seen of characters. We get a bunch of new ones in this one, and it's a different point of view entirely, isn't it?
This is, I suppose, we've had a little bit of a departure from our core team. It's been a couple of issues now since we've kind of seen them on their kind of failed Canadian mission. And interestingly enough, there's a Canada connection here in this story. So, but it does, having read the full run, just prior to this, it does make sense that we are going off to this other frontier that G.I. Joe are opening up in their war against Cobra.
Let's get into the covers, but before we do that, obviously we've got a new artist on, as we mentioned, on the book this time. We've got Emma Viacelli on this one, and she did a previous cover, didn't she?
That's right. I think it might have been issue 6, and she did the retailer incentive cover. And it's that beautiful cover where we have Jinx on one side and Scarlet on the other, and then this rip right down the center of the page. Yeah. Fantastic cover, and really captured what was happening in that particular issue, or the reveal at the end of that issue, I should say, where Scarlet kicks Jinx out of G.I. Joe. And of course, we didn't know at that time that Emma Viacelli was also going to be joining us on the interior pages as well. Yeah. So it's great to see her work really, full on in this issue number 8.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, let's go through the covers we have for this issue now. So obviously we've got cover A, which is Nico Walter, who Nico is a kind of friend of the show in a sense. Like he was very happy with his, I suppose, review of his Major Blood issue. I think it was Major Blood issue he did.
Yes,
and we were kind
that's
of talking,
right.
Yeah, we talked about how much we really enjoyed the art in that one. And then he went and sent us that really cool Snake Eyes kind of sketch,
Yes.
which was really lovely of him. So thank you for that, Nico. And he's done a very, very cool, almost like... This reminds me of something like Ghost in the Shell, where you see, like at the intro, where you see the main character getting kind of put together, like in like that kind of robot kind of cyborg form. And this is obviously on the front page, the front cover, we've got the battle android troopers being constructed in a facility. And man, this is like kind of Terminator vibes and all sorts, isn't it?
This is a beautiful piece of work here. You know, we love Nico. I think his issue, as you mentioned there, on Major Blood, where we got to get inside the head of a maniac. His art style was fantastic on that. This is a great front cover. I think it's very relevant to what's happening in this issue, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But when we learn about bomb strikes, I suppose her objective, this cover seems very, very relevant to what's going on. Again, I love that. It means very sci-fi, which is what you should expect, for kind of bat constructions. It's a bit Terminator-ish. It reminds me a little bit of Westworld,
yes,
as well. It's just a really cool cover. And of course, the color palette, which has been consistent throughout on this particular run, of the kind of minimal use of color. So I'm not sure if Brittany Peer has done the colors for this particular cover, but it does look superb.
Yeah, we've only got Nico Walter as the name on the actual cover, so I imagine he's done the colors as well. But it could very well be the fact that Brittany jumped on those colors, because that color scheme is definitely continued throughout. Okay, moving on to cover B, and this is kind of one of those ones where, in actual fact, both the other covers that we have left on here relate in no way, shape, or form to what's going on in the actual issue. We have a completely different cast of characters. Obviously, it's also interesting because we have Snake Eyes and Jinx on the same cover still. So that's Scarlet and Jinx. Sorry, we have Scarlet and Jinx on the cover, and it's kind of there's a confusion here, and I wonder if I feel like these covers were done way in advance of a lot of the story synopses or even stories being completed, because this is a Freddie Williams II cover with colours from Jeremy Colwell, and it's really nice. It's really, really awesome, and it's obviously got Scarlet in the foreground, Roadblock, a Tiger, Jinx, and is that Fade Away, I think?
I would go with Fade Away.
Yeah, Fade Away with the hood
with her hoodie pulled up, yeah.
Yeah, and they're kind of coming down some steps. You've got a Cobra Viper in the background that looks like it's on a banner. He's holding a flag on a banner. Classic. And it's all very, there's a spotlight on them, so it looks like they've been caught in the act of doing something by Cobra.
Oh, they're busted, yeah.
What do you think of this one?
This is a great cover. There's something very familiar about Freddie Williams II's work. Have we seen him on other G.I. Joe stuff? Because this looks really familiar stylistically.
He's done other covers, I believe.
So this is an art style, or an illustrative style that feels very familiar. Slightly different interpretation to our core characters. It's stylistically, it's very different to Chris Evenhouse's very clean style.
Yeah.
So visually, it's a bit of a departure, but I think as a piece of illustration, it's very dramatic. Clearly, the Joes have been. They are busted. They are just been caught in the act of whatever sabotage they're up to. It's nice and dynamic. I think it's pretty cool. I have the Nico Walter covers, which I'm delighted about that. But had I got the variant B, I wouldn't be unhappy with that cover at all. It looks pretty cool.
Absolutely. And finally, we have the retailer incentive, art by Adam Gorham and colours by Kelly Fitzpatrick. And this one, again, it's almost like a similar kind of team of players as we have on the Freddie Williams cover. And what is interesting is we have it from the perspective of a Viper. So you got the reflection in the kind of chrome visor, and you can see two other Vipers. So they've basically surrounded a group of Joes, and it is Frontier, Scarlet, and Tiger. So again, we've got another character from the Joes in there. We've got more Vipers on show. I wonder if this story initially wasn't going to be about Chuckles and Bomb Strike, because it's two very similar groups of Joes involved here.
I think you've just touched on something there, because none of these characters that we see on the cover B and the retailer incentive appear in this particular issue. But yet that's 2 out of 3 covers devoted to this particular team. Were these covers scheduled for maybe an earlier issue, or did something shift in the writing timeline where this kind of parallel story now with Bomb Strike and Chuckles was brought forward? who knows? But it's a great cover. This is super work from Adam Gorham and Kelly Fitzpatrick. I think it's a really nice angle to take, seeing the reflection tells the story of what's going on. I thought that was a really nice touch. Now it looks super.
Yeah, really nice. Some really cool covers for this one. Let's get into the actual comic now. As we open the page, to the first splash page, we get a few really interesting things going on. We have two characters embraced in a kiss. Is that right? Is that the right term? What's the term? I suppose. Okay.
It's called getting it on.
Yeah, they're making out in the first cover, and we're not sure who they are at first glance, but there's a big cobra symbol behind them, and then below that we've got this beautiful shot of what is like the slightly rejigged silent castle, which looks amazing. Yes. And I love how that's been kind of incorporated into what is, as it says at the top, Transcarpathia Cobra Command European headquarters. So we're kind of delving into more of the G.I. Joe fake country lore here that Larry kind of set up many moons ago in the Marvel run. And Transcarpathia has always been one of those kind of fake places that that they use for kind of Eastern Europe effectively. And so that's where we are, and we're basically introduced to these two characters. We only get the first names initially as they're having their kind of conversation, their kind of lovers kind of conversation, and it's Archie as the clearly Cobra lab guy, because he's got the big white lab coat on, and Alyssa.
And the Cobra emblem.
Now, any kind of deep Joe fans will recognise both of those names. Archie, short for Archibald, and of course Archibald Manev is Dr. Venom. So that straight away is a really nice kind of utilisation of this particular character in this lore, and a lovely little touch there by Paul. And speaking of Alyssa, again, deep cut fans will know Alyssa as Alyssa Stahl, one of the Stahl siblings, aka Bomb Strike. So again, we've got Bomb Strike and Dr. Venom. So immediately you could maybe ascertain that there might be something else going on here. And as we turn the page again and we read the text as it's kind of going, we realise that Alyssa's actually a deep cover agent.
Yeah, this is a great intro. Firstly, just to come back to your comment on the art, I think Emma Vicelli's art in this is magnificent.
Big time. Beautiful
artwork in this. And it does complement the existing one, which has predominantly been Chris Evenhouse. It works really, really well. But certainly when I started reading this, I wasn't really sure what was going on that kind of front page. It's a very different scenario from what we're used to. We're not back in Chicago anymore. We're not in Indianapolis. No familiar faces on the first couple of pages of this. But as you say, it's very quickly revealed that it is Bomb Strike, that she's working in deep cover, and the asset that she's working is Dr. Venom. What kind of caught me off guard is that Dr. Venom is not anything like what we're used to in the Real American Hero universe, where he's a complete nut job. This guy looks like a nice guy.
Yeah, he's kind of I think he's very smitten with Alyssa, and he's being utilised obviously for that information, as it were. And she even mentions at one point that she has got information on the next level, like the next stage of Battle Android Troopers, and like kind of very important information on the next generation of that. So, and you can see like there's a little kind of cutaway showing you that it's hidden in one of the bed frames, I think, or wedged into a bed frame. So that's where the information is. She has to try and smuggle it out, and obviously she knows that she can't do that easily because, Cobra Stronghold is very, very secure. They're all checked and so on and so forth. So she's hoping that she can come up with a way to do that. However, she does leave the compound at one point, and everyone's very friendly with her and very nice to her. So she's obviously built up a relationship with the other kind of members and kind of soldiers and all that of the Cobra kind of empire around her. And she goes out to meet with another character, and that's where we're introduced to another fan favourite in Chuckles.
Chuckles, absolutely. It's and in this scenario here, Chuckles is Bomb Strike's handler.
Yeah.
So she's making her way to him, making sure she's followed. and meets him discreetly for lunch, where she effectively reports back in and they start to discuss the latest in the operation. And we get a little bit of insight into Chuckles' character as well as part of this conversation. And it's one of the things I love about Paul Aller's writing is that the characters are really, really important, and developing the characters is really important. And what we learn here is that Chuckles obviously has a history where he's been in deep cover, and we don't get any of the detail other than he fell in love with the asset that he was working, and presumably ended up having to execute that asset. We're not 100% sure, but it's as he's trying to warn Alyssa about the dangers of kind of getting too close to the asset, she kind of retaliates with that, and you can see it's a real sore point for him.
Yeah.
And he basically, doesn't finish his lunch. He gets up and he leaves the table.
Yeah, amazing. And it's really, I do like that whole kind of back and forth. I love the fact that Chuckles is being used as the handler in this scenario. And it's really cool because you can tell him immediately, like he's got the blonde hair, he's got the, the kind of, the baby face, and then you look at the shirt and he's got the Hawaiian shirt on. So it's like clearly Chuckles a mile away. And that's just a really nice little touch there from the art. Now, at that point, we switch back to this big dinner that was actually previewed or like kind of mentioned previously by Chuckles himself when he says that, you're having that state dinner with the snakes tonight. So we're then thrown into this kind of dinner situation. And we have a really nasty piece of work, don't we, in this setup?
I actually love this. So clearly, Alyssa is now, our bomb strike is back in the Cobra Castle, and head of the dinner table is Overlord, which I thought this was a really nice touch. This is Dr. Venom's boss. Yep. Overlord is running the operations here in Europe.
Another great use of a character, isn't it, really?
Brilliant use of the character. And I love that he has the monocle as part of his... he looks very, aristocratic in his kind of dress, and the monocle he's got, which is obviously harkens back to the action figure. It's a nice feature in the character design. But in comparison to Dr. Venom, who seems like this very idealistic scientist, Overlord is a tyrant. Absolutely lethal. And he gives us a little bit of information here as well about Bomb Strike's cover. So what we learn here is that she's a Canadian diplomat, and Canada is not currently at war or occupied by Cobra. And she's supposed to be negotiating some kind of deal on behalf of the Canadian government to allow the bats to get positioned on the border with the United States and Canada, which in the United States, as we know, is now occupied by Cobra. So she's inspecting the facility. That's her cover to get in here and ultimately steal these secret plans, which are schematics into the next generation bats. But Overlord makes it very clear at this overall meeting that this is all just a charade. Canada are at the mercy of Cobra, and it's only a matter of time before Canada follows the same fate as the United States has.
Yeah. What is really mind-blowing, that is not a pun, in this particular scene is the way. This is also a really intricately and well-written kind of part here, because what Paul kind of does here is he makes it appear as though Overlord, he knows exactly what's going on, and he knows, like you say, about Canada, possibly having spies within the Cobra setup because of the next generation of bats. And even though he is trusting, he is aware that, not Bomb Strike is Bomb Strike, but he thinks that she is a Canadian diplomat. He does think that is the case. There's one little moment in this which really is well done, in that, yes, he knows that she's a Canadian diplomat, but he also thinks there are spies within the organization. He doesn't think necessarily it's her, but there's one moment when one of the servants comes up to Alyssa, and he's kind of, taking a plate for her that she's just finished, and she says, thank you, Hans, yes? And he says, it is Hans, thank you, ma'am. And then Overlord then jumps in and goes, basically just, says to everybody that there's a reason that she knows your name, isn't there? And she kind of feigned that, she may have a bit of uncertainty because she wanted everyone to be at ease and kind of put us off the scent. But in actual fact, she knows it's Hans because she knows who you are. And she kind of responds with, I could not care less whether you care less, etc., etc. And they try and, Dr. Monev tries to kind of like over a little bit with a little bit of humor. And Overlord basically says, well, you know his name because he's an operative for the Canadian government, an informant working against Cobra Command. And Hans is like, what? No, and then bang. The next image you see is blam. You see Alyssa's face, like kind of almost shocked, but not like you could see her holding back the shock almost, with blood spatter on her as well, because Hans has just had his brains blown out by one of the battle android troopers. And that's where he basically says, that's where Overlord says, look, we will allow you to tour our BATS facility, not as part of a larger deal, but because I have nothing to hide. And because I want you to see this new generation of BATS up close before we station them along your southern border. And then it's just like, do you understand? And he's like, and she doesn't respond. And he says, do you understand? She says, I understand. And then it's good. And then they all go back to normal after that. And the bats start mixing cocktails, which I think is crazy.
We're talking, 3 pages. And there's so much in those 3 pages. And it's just a brilliantly written and illustrated sequence of events where you see the insanity and the cruelty of Overlord and just how ruthless he is. And it's like, it's nothing to him.
Yeah.
Somebody getting shot at the dinner table, it's not going to, it's not that it's not even going to interrupt the dinner. It's almost part of the entertainment itself.
Yeah.
For him. But again, something I want to touch on just to connect this back to what we've seen in the past is that G.I. Joe are clearly targeting the bats as kind of the weak spot or the chink in Cobra's armor. The Dreadnoks, we go all the way back to, I think it was in issue 3 or issue 4, I'm not sure. They had developed a weapon that could destroy bats, but the only way they could deploy the weapon was in a suicide attack. And then we go to the last time we saw our G.I. Joe team, our core team of Tiger, Jinx, Roadblock, Fadeaway, and Frontier. They were trying to get that Dreadnought weapon over the border into Canada.
Yeah.
So that military scientists could then develop that into a weapon that they could use in a way that it doesn't involve an actual suicide attack.
Yeah.
And we know that they failed in that particular mission. And now we have a bomb strike, a G.I. Joe operative, who was also a Canadian diplomat, trying to infiltrate Cobra's European headquarters to get some schematics on these bats. So I love how, while this seems like a very departure from what we're used to, this actually connects back in really, really well. Which the events that have all kind of preceded it. So at this point in the story, I'm like, it all makes sense now, and really just on the edge of my seat to see where this is going to go next.
Yeah. And what I mentioned earlier that Manev was unaware he was being played, and in which case he is unaware that he's of the end game that Bomb Strike has, but he's in it with her to get this information out of Cobra and to leave Cobra behind. So as much as he is unaware of her end game to get out and leave him behind, or have him captured or whatever as a prisoner of war, he believes that he is also helping her. So he knows that she's an undercover operative. But he wants to kind of obviously help and get out and so on and so forth. But obviously that isn't her end game. And as we kind of go along, we see that they're getting closer, both of them, aren't they, to each other? It's like almost like happening anyway, whether they like it or not.
Venom he's in love with Bomb Strike. And there's no doubt about that. I mean, he's in love with her. He's talking about giving up his entire career with Cobra, leaving the organization. He talks about he designed the bats to use them for peacekeeping duties like surgical operations or rescue operations. They weren't designed as weapons when he designed them. So we learn a lot about this character in his conversations with Bomb Strike, and he is very idealistic. He's also very naive as well.
Yeah.
To think that he could just sort of, walk away from Cobra, I mean, he's deluded. It's never going to happen. Bomb Strike is still kind of working the asset. We get a lot of kind of monologue from Bomb Strike, kind of self-talk comes up there where she's telling us, the reader, how much she abhors Cobra and at times hates this guy, but at other times those feelings are definitely mixed, where she does feel something for him. Ultimately, this leads to the point where Dr. Venom is going to leave the palace with Bomb Strike. She's sewn in the data chip with the stolen plans into his shirt pocket. And what she's thinking here is that, well, they'll scan me, they won't scan him, and that's how I'm going to get the data out. Of course, that totally is not going to go the way she planned.
Fail.
And he's scanned, the jig's up, and Bombstrike, at this point, she has to blow her cover. She pulls out a pistol. It's death to Cobra. She guns down the guards, and then standing over Venom, tells him, now, before any reinforcements arrive, you've got to take me out, take me as your prisoner. And he quickly jumps into action. You see, he punches her, knocks her to the ground. Guards arrive on the scene, and he instructs them to not take her to the detention facility, but to bring her to the dungeon down below the palace.
Yeah, and then obviously back down there in the dungeon, we have her. You know, they bring like food. Mikhail brings food for her, and he's actually been really nice to her the whole time that you know they've known each other. They have a bit of a kind of back and forth, and you know he kind of gives up some information actually to her, and even explains that Dr. Mindbender is going to be coming soon to basically interrogate her. So she's like, ugh. And then basically at that point, she's rescued by Monev, who turns up to kind of break her out, and they're going to get out and so on and so forth. But obviously before that can happen, they come under some issues, one of which is Mikhail, who, as they turn the corner, Monev shoots him dead. And there's one little point there where obviously she's had this, you know, she hasn't had anything against Mikhail because he's been so nice to her. They've had like a nice little kind of, you know, relationship. And she just stands over his dead silhouette, just kind of looking at him like, ugh. And then they're running up the stairs and even more Vipers come in. I just thought that was a really powerful moment that, again, didn't have to be in there, but was a nice touch.
Well, do you know, this is something, we probably haven't really mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning. The Cobra characters, you get people like, you know, Mindbender, like Overlord, like Major Blood. They're psychopaths. Yeah. They're easily identifiable as kind of the bad guys. But the foot soldiers that we meet from time to time are just normal people. Yeah. They have families. Like there's an issue there a couple of issues back where Tiger's on a train and he's trying to download Border Patrol routines from some guy's laptop, and your man's talking about his pet goldfish and his family and stuff. Yeah. So they all have family lives. Working for Cobra is just a job. They're not necessarily like James Bond villains where, you know, all the bad guys are just nut jobs, you know. Exactly,
yeah. There's a lot more to them, a lot more depth to them as well. Even the ones that are really bad, like even Major Blood, that issue that we saw of Major Blood, his kind of character is way more like complex than usual Major Blood characters.
And no kind of Aussie, kind of slang Aussie comments in his dialogue either, you know, which is nice, always a nice touch. But Bombstrike and Venom are making a break for us. Venom, blinded by love, is busting Bombstrike out of the Cobra dungeon. He guns down Mikhail. Him and Bombstrike take out a couple more guards. And you can see that, you know, Bombstrike clearly has some serious military training. She's able to break a Cobra guard's wrist by grabbing the gun and twisting. Whereas Venom is a complete amateur. He hasn't really got a clue what he's at. And they successfully get out of the dungeon and make their way to a safe house. And I like how this is, they're in the room in the safe house, and you see Bombstrike reaching for a plant, and there's kind of a little zoom in on the plant where she twists or rotates the plant, clearly activating some sort of a signal for a pickup. And it's here where she reveals to Venom that, you know, I am undercover, we're not going to go off and live in the country, and she injects him with a drug to render him unconscious.
And that's when the Joe team turns up in Viper cost, like, you know, kind of like in Cobra disguises, and they come grab him, and, you know, away they go. Now, what is interesting here is a couple of other little things I'd like to mention in this kind of in the lead up to the end of the issue. As the Joes turn up, they're doing the usual thing, the kind of mouse drowned in the it's like the code word they have to say to each other in order to make sure they're legit. And she just goes, just come in and secure the asset. He'll be drifting in and out for the next few hours. She can't even be bothered to say what the response phrase is. And she says, "Plan Omicron?" ? You know, she explains, she says, "Plan Omicron." she says, yes, just a quick 200-mile drive before we rendezvous with Action Force and the October Guard, which I thought was brilliant, because obviously we're dealing with Transcarpathia, we're dealing with European missions here, so it's brilliant that they dropped in the fact that, you know, there's obviously a British version of the rebel forces. There's obviously a Russian version of it. So all of these kind of groups that are obviously from the G.I. Joe lore are now part of this kind of universe as well, which is brilliant. And it just makes me kind of very excited to see what they could do with both Action Force and the October Guard.
Do you know, when I read that, I was like, yes!
Absolutely brilliant. I love that. I think it's really, really nice touch.
No, I mean, our story kind of comes to an end where, you know, Venom is kind of coming in and out of consciousness. He's kind of shoved into the back of a van where he's going to be driven off for this particular rendezvous. We're not quite sure yet exactly what his fate is going to be, but he's been left some sort of a note or letter by Bombstrike, and in that she basically is pleading with him to take this as a second chance, defect, help the good guys, but, you know, forget about me. I'm not going to be part of your life anymore. So if Venom is returned to in the story at a later point, it would be curious to see how he's going to react to all that, because he's been used. He's going to realize he's been played, and it'll be interesting to see what that does to this very, naive and idealistic character.
Yeah, I wonder if it would actually make him more kind of bonkers and more like Venom. It could just be like his origin into what he becomes in a sense. But again, I really loved what they did with that, and I loved the kind of the sign off where, as she gets in the front of the van, Chuckles is driving it, and he says to her, "There's a sandwich under your seat," and she's like, "You're a pro, Chuckles," and he says, "And don't you forget it." And then they drive off, and it's kind of like, and what I liked about it was that, you know, Bombstrike and Chuckles both get out of this one, so, you know, that's another couple of cool characters we've got within the G.I. Joe team. We now are aware of Action Force and October Guard, so, you know, to be able to see something from that crop up in the future would be amazing. And, you know, Dr. Monev is still kicking and breathing, and you know, Dr. Mindbender, who's got a name drop, he's, you know, untouched in this, as is Overkill. So, you know, you've still got some pretty big pieces on the chessboard here that are going to be both, you know, a little bit irked at the fact that they've been, you know, they've had information get out. You know, Dr. Monev's going to, you know, will he turn into Venom in the future? There's loads of really cool aspects that kind of hover over this particular issue, and again, it's really nice to see from a different perspective of the Joe team. There's
a lot unfolding in this universe now, and what we're realizing is that the plan is much bigger than just resistance fighters in Chicago. It's G.I. Joe are fighting a front in the US, in Canada, in Europe. The universe is expanding at a rapid pace now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes down the road next month.
So issue 9 is next month, and I believe issue 9 is going to be another character-filled classic. So that should be interesting to see. For this issue, though, Brian, I mean, what's your potating, and give us a quick brief overall.
Well, I'm lucky that I had a chance to read this a couple of times, and this was a grower. First instance, I was like, I don't want to leave these. Like, I'm really attached to the core crew that were established in the first few issues.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't want to leave those guys. You know, let's go back there and see what they're doing, because we were left on a cliffhanger with Jinx, you know, leaving the squad.
I know, that's
being
massive.
Fired by Scarlet.
Yeah.
And Snake Eyes being introduced. So I am anxious to get back to that, but haven't had it, you know, some time with this issue and read it a few times. This is a really great issue. Beautiful art, some beautiful storytelling, and it is opening up a new front in the story, which is going to be fantastic for us if it brings in, you know, elements of Action Force, elements of the October Guards. That's going to be very exciting there. But even taking this issue on its own, it is superbly done. I'd have to give this a 5 out of 5. It's quality work, as per every single issue in this run to date.
I have to agree with that. I'm also going to give it 5. It's just, again, for this one, like, I don't feel like I had to read it multiple times to kind of really get into it in a different way. I felt like I took my time with this a lot more than I have with the other issues. Like, sometimes generally in comic reading, I'll zip through stuff and just be like, oh yeah, cool, and then maybe go back again at, you know, a slower pace. With this issue, I looked at that first page and I'm kind of like, okay, I need to know who these people are. So I was kind of studying every little word, every little word balloon and everything. And I was kind of like, oh, Alyssa, cool. That's probably Bomb Strike. Oh, Archie. I'm sure that's Archibald Monev. I'm sure of it. White lab coat. I wonder if that's Dr. Venom. And then as you go through, you start seeing more of those clues. And it was like, man, and there's loads of really cute little homages dropped in there. Obviously, Chuckles is really cool to see as a character. Again, a massive fan favourite character, one of my favourite characters. And to see him in a position, not as the guy who's undercover doing the dirty work, but as the handler for for Bomb Strike was just brilliant. And to have Bomb Strike in that role, I thought was really cool as well. Like, she, in the previous G.I. Joe universe, is basically forward air control is what she's kind of known for. Or counterintelligence was a secondary specialty. So it's nice that Paul utilised that secondary specialty in this. And in her most recent release in the club figure, the FSS figure, she was forward air control still and had like a drone, and she had like a little laptop. So she does a lot of that kind of stuff. And her secondary specialty was ISR UAV operator. So, they kind of changed that aspect of her in the modern figure. But the fact that Paul kind of went into that counterintelligence aspect, we didn't have to, we didn't use, say, Scarlet, who's already kind of like, she's the head of the team. Lady J, we're not using her in this kind of setup. We're not using someone like, I don't know, like Chameleon, who's a Cobra operative anyway. But, we're using someone, Bomb Strike, in this way, shape or form. So I thought it was really good. And just in general, the writing's really solid. It's not too obvious. Obviously, it's playing on a couple of tropes here, isn't it? It's playing on the female undercover operative, getting as much information as she can from Dr. Monev, the falling in love aspect, or getting too close to the subject. But in the end, it doesn't end as those kind of stories do. Everyone survives apart from the Vipers, who get kind of taken out. So that to me is really interesting, because it's like usually you'll get someone get knocked off, someone will die in that setup of a big character. So it's interesting to see that all those characters are still intact.
It's the innocent people just doing their day-to-day jobs. They're the victims of. They're the ones that get killed. Hans, Mikhail.
None of which are they're not like any less hard hitting. They're still obviously really sucky, deaths. But what I mean is in terms of like the A-list characters that you're seeing all the time, I'm surprised they got through. But yeah, like say Hans, that's really shocking. Mikhail's sad because of he seems like a nice guy, and he's really nice to Alyssa as well. So that seemed really, really harsh as well. But again, effective.
No, it's a cracker of an episode. And it just occurred to me that in the Real American Hero parallel universe, if we go back maybe last year, we had Bomb Strike leading the team that took out the Venom bot.
Yeah, exactly.
And put pay to Dr. Venom once and for all in that particular universe. So
she was undercover as well initially, wasn't she, or captured or something?
Well, actually, what they did was it was her team went in undercover.
That was it, yeah.
And I can't remember the team now, and she snuck in through a sewer system into the facility. So it's interesting parallels there, for sure.
I'm thinking there's one where she fought the Red Shadows, and she has a fight with the Robo Skull. And prior to that, either she's captured, because there's like a cover of her in shackles, and I think the Black Mage is standing over her in like the silhouette or something. But that, I'm pretty sure that happened earlier on in the run, like way earlier on in the run.
I think that's a John Wall cover. Never happened in the universe.
I'm putting it up on screen. Anyway, Brian, dude, thanks for joining me for this one. It's another cracking issue from Paul Allen, IDW's G.I. Joe series. We'll be back again very soon for A Real American Hero 274, which we should be able to get done for next week. But as for now, thank you, mate, very much.
My pleasure.
That's it for this installment of the Full Force Comics Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host, Brian Hickey. See you next time, and as always, full force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @The Full Force, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/The Full Force, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback or questions. We have also started a Patreon page, so if you want to see your name up in lights on these videos or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/The Full Force Podcast, or click the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, located at 601 Business Loop 70 West Suite 263, located in the Parkade Center, Columbia, Missouri. You can visit their website at distantplanetcomics.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/distantplanetcomics.